Good afternoon. Today I'm going to be reviewing the Pagani design PD-1715. This watch is available from Fashion Watch Store on AliExpress for €108. So firstly, let's look at the box that the watch comes in, and then I'll talk you through the other items one gets with the piece. So the Pagani design PD-1715 comes in this black cardboard watch box. One removes the lid and the watch sits inside on a piece of foam inside a foam cutout panel, as one would expect. Although basic, it does suffice in protecting the watch in shipping, and I think it's perfectly acceptable, bearing in mind that this is a low tier price point piece at only €108. With regards to the other items, one gets this branded microfiber polishing cloth. I always think it's a nice touch to get a branded microfiber polishing cloth irrespective of the price point of a piece. This is the owner's instruction manual, and it also details the terms and conditions of the international guarantee. Although basic, it does have clear and concise diagrams and the instructions are in English. It details the operation of the movement used, which is the Miyota 8215. And lastly, one also gets this plastic guarantee card, and as you can see the reverse isn't filled in, but I'm pleased to report that it's covered by the usual 12-month international guarantee. So with regards to the specifications of the piece, this is the Pagani design PD-1715. The watch is clearly an homage to the Rolex Datejust, very similar proportions, 39.8mm case diameter. It has a lug-to-lug measurement of 48.9mm, a thickness of 11.4mm, and a lug width of 20mm. The oyster style bracelet tapers from 20mm out the lugs down to the flip-lock clasp. As you can see, the flip-lock clasp is signed to a high standard with Pagani design engraved, mirror polish to the flanks, brush satin finish to the top side and the underside. However, there is a negative to it. This edge of the flip-lock clasp is razor sharp, and it's actually dangerously sharp. The corners are also dangerously sharp, so there is room for improvement. Poor quality control, poor build quality and poor execution. To have sharp burrs, sharp edges which are razor sharp on a clasp is wholly unacceptable, regardless of the price point. So I appreciate this is a low tier piece at only €108, but to have razor sharp edges on the end of a clasp which is dangerous is wholly unacceptable. So with regards to the rest of the specification, flat sapphire crystal, and the negative is there is no AR coating on the underside, which is a cost cutting measure, and really it would benefit from AR coating because, as you can see, when I tilt the piece in the light at an oblique angle, it is highly reflective and there is a lot of glare from the silver baton hands and the silver applied indices, so it really does need clear anti-reflective coating. Now, looking at the symmetry of the applied indices, I like the dial layout as per the Datejust, which this is an homage to. But however, there is a major negative to the hands. If you look at the baton style hands, which are clearly Datejust style, they are clearly undersized. They have got the proportions incorrect. They're too small, too short, and really they need to be scaled up in proportion to better balance the applied indices. They've really made a mistake with that. On a positive note, one improvement with this piece that I haven't seen on other watches is they have laser etched around the rehort. If you look underneath the sapphire crystal closely at the rehort, you can see they have laser etched Pagani design all the way around, rather like Rolex engraves their rehort, and I think that is a notable change. I haven't seen that before on a Pagani design watch, and that's something unique to the PD-1715. So it's an improvement, and it's clear the direction that the brand is taking, and they are trying to increase the specification of the piece. Now, another negative is the Cyclops magnifier. As you can see, over the date complication at 3, we have a Cyclops magnifier, but there are two faults with it. It only has 1.5 times magnification. On a Rolex, it's 2.5 times magnification. And really, to have a 1.5 times magnification over the date window is negligible performance. It doesn't enhance the legibility of the date. So really, I think this piece would be better if they deleted the Cyclops magnifier and just had a flat sapphire crystal. And the other thing is, it's incorrectly aligned. The Cyclops magnifier is sitting too low, and it's also sitting offset to the left, so it's misaligned. And again, this is a fundamental that watch brands have to get correct. It's wholly unacceptable, regardless of the price point of a piece. Even with low tier pieces, one has to get the alignment of a Cyclops magnifier correct over the date complication. So it's sitting too low, and it's also sitting too far to the left, and it's a real disappointment. With regards to the crown, it's solid stainless steel made from 316L grade, coin edge finished, and signed with the Pagani design emblem, mirror polished to a high standard. So let's test the crown action. Silky smooth, it is actually very impressive. Unscrews with minimal resistance, good interface between the thread of the internal thread of the crown and the external thread of the crown tube. The Miyota caliber 8215 has a characteristic pop. It pushes the winding stem out of the movement. So in the first position, it's the manual wind position, and one can manually wind the 8215 to top it up to its maximum 40 hours. One can feel the tension in the mainspring gradually building up. So the crown execution is good. Pulling it out to the first click position is the quick set date complication, and as you can see, looking closely at the date window, you can see the quick set complication works as one would expect. Pulling it out to the second click position is the time setting position, and it is smooth. Now, the caliber 8215 has more firm resistance. One can feel the gearing. It has more friction in the movement than the Seiko NH35A, which we will all be familiar with. Personally, I prefer the feeling of the NH35A, but the Miyota 8215 is silky smooth, although it does have more firm resistance. Now the negative is, as you can see, I have now pulled out the crown to the second position to set the time. Normally that would hack the movement. It would stop the second hand dead to set the time precisely to the second, but the negative of the Miyota 8215 is it does not have hacking. One cannot stop the second hand dead to set the time precisely to the second, whereas with the Seiko NH35A, one can hack the movement, one can stop the second hand. So that is a major negative of the Miyota 8215. Pushing it back in, it's got a nice positive click, and I'll test screwing it back down. Immediate thread pickup. So the quality of the screw down crown is excellent, and Pagani Design deserve full credit for that. They have got the threading on the internal thread of the crown and the external thread of the crown tube machined very well. So it does work very well, and the crown provides an effective hermetic seal to 200 meters of water resistance, which at this price point is very impressive, because one would normally expect to see 100 meters of water resistance, but this is a 200 meter water resistant piece. Now, with regards to the Caseback, it's solid stainless steel made from 316L grade, and I like the engraving. This is a new design for Pagani Design Casebacks. They sometimes put artistic designs on their Casebacks, which you'll have seen in my previous reviews, but this is a new style where they've put the Pagani Design emblem and the reference number of the piece, PD-1715, engraved in the centre. I think this is better, and I would like them to implement this design of Caseback throughout their range, because I think that it's actually very aesthetically pleasing, and credit where credit's due. The Caseback is finished to a very high standard, beautifully engraved, mirror polished to the circumference, nice milled slots, and brushed satin finished to the centre section. So it's a very good looking screw down stainless steel Caseback, which provides an effective hermetic seal to 200 meters, and as you can see, it is also very low profile. So I like it. So I think the screw down Caseback is very good. The solid end links are well machined and a good tight fit to the case, so no criticisms with regards to that. Now, with regards to the finishing of the head of the piece, they deserve credit, because the bezel, which has a domed profile, is polished to a flawless finish, as are the flanks to the case. As you can see, beautiful job to the mirror polishing on both flanks of the case. Brushed satin finish to the tops of the lugs, which are also done to a very high standard. So the case finishing with regards to the head of the piece is very good. I do like the lip of the flat sapphire crystal, which projects above the top edge of the domed bezel. It's nice the way it catches the light, and it does add interest to it. It's just a shame that there's no AR coating on the underside. Now, with regards to the bracelet, this is the real disappointment of this piece. If you look at the end link, there's huge play. It's a very sloppy fit. The pin going through the end link in the bracelet is a very loose fit, as you can see. And there's a cumulative effect of all the play in the bracelet. It makes it very rattly, because every one of the screw pins, as you can see, has play. And bear in mind, these are screw pins, they're not push pins, so there's no reason for them to have any play whatsoever. They should be a very tight fit in the three links in the oyster style bracelet, but every single link, every single screw pin going through the oyster style bracelet has play, and the cumulative effect of that, when you add up all the play in the bracelet, it rattles and it feels very sloppy, and especially in the end link, as you can see. And I'll just check the other side. It's exactly the same. This is one of the worst executed bracelets I have ever seen on a watch. If you look at that amount of play, this is wholly unacceptable. And bear in mind, this isn't a €70 Pagani design PD-1715. This is €108, so it's significantly more expensive than other Pagani design watches, and yet it has worse build quality. Look at the quality control. It's just dreadful, and laterally it's even worse. Side to side the play is bad, but then if you look at it in the other direction, it's even worse. I mean, that is significant. We're looking at 1 to 2 millimeters of play. I'll just check the other side again. It's exactly the same, as you can see. 1 to 2 millimeters of play in a pin in the end link of a bracelet. That is just dreadful. So I'll give you a wrist shot and you can see how it fits on 8-inch wrist. Now, I haven't sized the bracelet. I've simply taken the watch out of the watch box, and I'm pleased to report that, as you can see, it easily fits my 8-inch wrist. It would even fit up to an 8.5-inch wrist. Now, it is a very comfortable piece to wear on wrist. 39.8 millimeters, so it's just under 40 millimeters. The proportions are very good. The 20 millimeter bracelet is the correct proportion for a 39.8, which is very close to 40. And we've got a 48.9 millimeter lug to lug measurement. As you'll know from my previous reviews, I consider 48 millimeters to be the sweet spot. So at 48.9 millimeter lug to lug measurement, it really is very close to perfection in terms of proportions. So this will fit you regardless of whether you're a collector with a 6 to 7-inch wrist or a 7 to 8-inch wrist respectively. Ideally at 40 millimeters, it is best suited to a collector with a smaller wrist of 6 to 7 inches rather than a larger wrist. It does feel very comfortable. It's a very well balanced piece. The 20 millimeter bracelet tapering down to the flip lock clasp is very well proportioned, and it's 144 grams. So as you'll know from my previous reviews, I regard circa 150 grams to be the sweet spot for 40 millimeter pieces on a bracelet. At 144, it gives a nice feeling of heft and wrist presence, but it doesn't feel uncomfortable to wear for long periods of time, such as 8 to 12 hours per day. Now, there is one major positive of this piece, and it's the low profile. It's 11.4 millimeters. Now, normally with an automatic piece, one would expect to see 13 millimeters. At 11.4, including the flat sapphire crystal, it is actually a very low profile piece, and due to the case shape, it wraps around the wrist very snugly. So that is something to bear in mind if you like pieces that easily slip underneath the shirt cuff if you wear business shirts. So an ideal daily wear piece. It's comfortable. It does feel very good because of the flat, low profile stainless steel case back, and it does easily slip underneath the shirt cuff. So it's a good looking piece on wrist. The palm dial, which is clearly an homage to the Datejust palm dial, does add interest to it. It does have a reflective metallic finish to it, which changes colour in the light. So it is an interesting dial, which does change. Now, let's do a Lume test and we'll see how the Lume performs when it's charged up to its absolute maximum. So as always, I'm going to use my 100 UV LED torch to charge it up to its absolute peak. Right, so that's now fully charged, and as you can see, it clearly uses C3 Luminova rather than C3 Super Luminova. So that is a clear cost-cutting measure. Pagani Design is a brand that really frustrates me because they make efforts to upgrade the specification in certain areas. For example, on this piece, they have laser etched the rehaults, which is an expensive production process to do, so they deserve credit for trying to improve the specification. But however, they cut corners in other areas which are fundamental to get right, such as using C3 Luminova rather than C3 Super Luminova. Now, the lume on the applied indices is glowing to an OK standard. It's glowing reasonably brightly, and it's also continuing to glow for a reasonable length of time. So it's acceptable, bearing in mind that this is a low tier price point piece. But the baton hands are wholly unacceptable. They're undersized, they're underproportioned, as I've discussed, and as you can see, the problem with that is they do not allow for a large enough area of lume to be applied on the baton hands. They're too slim, and they've hardly put any C3 Luminova on them whatsoever. They really are negligible performance. It's as if they have no lume whatsoever. Because of the lack of lume plots, they are glowing very poorly, and of course immediately beginning to fade to nothing. So this is wholly unacceptable, and it's a real disappointment of the piece. They should have just scaled up the proportion of the baton hands as per the Datejust, which this is an homage to, and applied several layers of C3 Luminova to get it correct. So very disappointing C3 Luminova, particularly on the hands. Right, so let's discuss the movement used. This uses the Miyota caliber 8215, which is made in Japan. Now, I'll explain the reason why it uses the 8215 rather than the Seiko NH35A for those of you that are unaware. There was a COVID outbreak in Malaysia. Seiko make the NH35A in two plants, one in Japan, one in Malaysia. And the Chinese brands such as Pagani Design use the Malaysia plant made NH35A. So there was a shortage of NH35A in China, and therefore the wholesale price of the NH35A increased. It became closer to the PT-5000. So many brands looked for alternatives. Pagani Design switched to using the Miyota caliber 8215, and San Martin switched to using the Epson caliber YN55A as alternatives, because there was still a good supply, because the Miyota 8215 is made in Japan rather than Malaysia. Now, I personally regard the Miyota 8215 to be a lower grade of movement than the NH35A, and as I've demonstrated, it does not have hacking, which is a major negative. The NH35A does have hacking. It has 21 joules, it runs at 21,600 vibrations per hour and a frequency of 3 Hz. So it has hand winding, which is good, but it doesn't have hacking, which is a negative. 40-hour power reserve is perfectly acceptable, and the stated accuracy is -20 to +40 seconds per day, so a rather wide accuracy range. This one has been regulated to +12 seconds per day, which isn't very impressive. It is within the -20 to +40, but really +12 seconds per day is inaccurate, and I would prefer that this had an NH35A and it was regulated to within ±5 seconds per day, or ideally better. So it's a poorly regulated movement, and really it's disappointing. Now, there are two other negatives to the Miyota 8215. It has a noisy rotor, and it's noticeably more noisy on wrist. One can hear the rotor spinning round because it has noisier bearings than the NH35A. The other thing is the rotor is inefficient because it is only a unidirectional winding movement. The rotor has to spin anti-clockwise in order to wind the movement. When it spins clockwise, it has a negligible winding effect. So the rotor can spin clockwise and anti-clockwise, but it will only wind the movement when it spins anti-clockwise, so half the time. With the Seiko NH35A, it's more efficient because it has a bidirectional winding rotor, and that's something I like, and it's also quieter. So the Miyota 8215 is a reliable, well-proven workhorse movement. It's been in use since 1977, so it's a well-proven movement. But however, I regard it to be lower grade than the Seiko NH35A. The build quality, the quality control, the finishing are all lower grade than the NH35A. So that's something to consider. Right, so lastly, I will summarise the piece. What do I think of it overall? Well, when I'm considering reviewing a watch on my channel, the watch should meet two criteria. It should be both excellent quality and excellent value at the respective price point. So the price point of this PD-1715 is €108. Really, to equate this piece, one has to split it into two, the head of the piece and also the bracelet. Now, I would describe this as a well-finished head of the piece. The quality of the mirror polishing, the brush satin finishing, and the build quality and the quality control of the head of the piece are all excellent. But however, it's badly let down by a poor quality bracelet, as I've detailed. If you look at the amount of play, this is the worst oyster style bracelet I have ever seen on my channel, and bear in mind I've reviewed over 150 watches. This is just incredibly bad. The bracelet is very poor, so it's hard to weigh up the piece because one has to add up the good quality finished head of the piece to the poor quality finished bracelet. Overall, I would describe it as poor quality. The hands are undersized and, as I've demonstrated, very poor lume quality, lack of AR coating, another cost-cutting measure. And really, the bracelet is absolutely dreadful. And the other thing is, as I've detailed earlier, we have a razor sharp edge on the end and razor sharp points, which are dangerous because they could cut the skin. They really are razor sharp, so they need to be deburred to a higher standard. But on a positive note, I'll show you something which is good about this. that other Pagani design watches don't have. They have pressed metal divers extension links, and this has a solid milled stainless steel divers extension link. But again, as you can see, it's dreadful. It has lots of play in it. But it's good that they didn't use the cost-cutting measure of a pressed metal clasp. I like to be consistent when I level criticism at a brand and talk about both the positives and the negatives equally. So, difficult piece to weigh up because there are some positives and some negatives. The laser etched rehort underneath the sapphire crystal is a positive, but overall there are too many negatives. There are more negatives than positives, and these are the things when I'm weighing up a watch, when I'm looking at does this meet my criteria of being both excellent quality and excellent value. I look at the number of positives and the number of negatives, and this has significant negatives. So I'm going to describe it as poor quality and poor value at €108. So for that reason, I cannot recommend it to you for your consideration. I hope you've enjoyed my review of the Pagani design PD-1715. Please feel free to post your own comments below the video. Thank you very much.